Hello, sir.
Hello. How
I'm
are you
just
doing?
sending out an invite, a link. And okay, everyone got it. So, how was your Rosh Hashanah?
It's pretty good. Um, I wasn't sure we were planning on hosting like a couple, like my family, a cousin of my wife, and I got a little sick, but then I was like good enough that we decided to. It was
I'm
okay to
so
invite them.
sorry to hear that you are not feeling well. Everything, I
Um,
hope nothing too serious. Well, as you were saying, it wasn't too serious.
no, I think either cold or allergies, or I don't know. It wasn't that serious, so
Okay,
we got to have a dinner, so that was nice. It was lots of food.
one dinner.
One dinner, and then we did dinner together the next day.
I hear
Um,
you. Okay,
and yeah, and I went to the Chabad to the service. That was my first, I think, Rosh Hashanah service. That was interesting.
this was your first Rosh Hashanah service,
Yep,
and what the whole service?
Shacharit. Yeah,
And
um,
how was? What are your thoughts?
it was good. It was long, and then I realized that I heard somebody say that it's the longest, but it was or I don't know, but it was good. I really enjoyed it. I was surprised that you have to bend down once. I wasn't ready for that, but yeah,
You mean bow down?
bow down. Yeah.
On Yom Kippur, it's multiple times.
hmm Yeah. So but I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, I would go there. I didn't do my research before that. I have the book. I think it's, who is it? I forget whose book has like on Jewish prayer that walks you through the whole liturgy, and like the prayer service and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I didn't look at that before I went. So that was interesting. But yeah, I'm getting to kind of like to know and knowing more of the people, obviously. So that's good.
That's nice. There's always welcome, Andrew.
What's popping?
So
Thank God we're discussing Ben's. As before we dive into our weekly learning, we're discussing Ben's Rosh Hashanah services.
Mhm.
Um, and I was about to tell Ben that uh, there's like competitions between synagogues, like whose prayers were longer, who blew the shofar longer, because
Mhm.
there's like you have to
Yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
there's all this are all different versions. Um, but it was very nice. I'm part of this new community, this new synagogue, so everything's very exciting, everything's very new. It was very nice. So there was like a very large turnout.
That's
So
cool.
that was also very good. Um,
Was it the
did
first Rosh Hashanah together with that specific community?
Yeah, with that specific community. So like people have to you have to buy chairs, seats, and they have there's a lot more people there, so it's like a little more crowded, but
Mm-hmm.
it's very nice, very beautiful services, beautiful singing. And
Nice.
my kids held out most of the services. At some point they had to bust out. They're like, we're done with this. This has been going on, like, this is like significantly longer than like the Sabbath service. So they're
hmm
like, okay. But it was very nice. Do you know, just on this topic, did you learn or study a little we why we blow the shofar?
Um, yeah, there were a bunch of conversations about that, if I can remember them well.
So I'll just mention that one of the reasons is specifically the sound of the shofar is um, well, it says, like, it talks about litkoa shofar, right, to blow the shofar. Then you're like, okay, but what is this shofar sound?
hmm
And
Yeah.
then the the sages, the commentary says, oh, that's simple. The sound is of a yavava, and you're like, okay, great. What's a yavava? And
hmm
then it says the yavava is a cry, and like it's sort of like this like primal cry, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the example they give is the mother of Sisera. Sisera is a general
Mm-hmm.
of the invading army, and he is fighting against Deborah, the prophetess, and Barak, the head of her army. And after Sisera loses the battle, even though he's never lost any battle because like he's this famous warlord general, his mother is waiting for him outside the window. And when she sees that he doesn't come back, she realizes my son is gone.
Right.
And she lets out this cry. And
Mhm.
it's interesting that the Torah uses this example of like this Gentile woman. We don't even know her name. We just know her as Sisera's mother. And there's a part of it not knowing her name, which is like any mother crying out for her son, really. And it doesn't matter whether it's even the worst person. Like we're giving this example of like this bad general that Yael, who's a Canaanite, Canaanite coming from Jethro's lineage, she ends up killing him. Either way, we end up recognizing that this primal cry it resonates and reaches God, so to speak, because we're saying like this is a mother crying. Who could say no to a mother for her tears? So
Right.
it's just it's powerful when you think about it that way. And
Mhm.
we have the community is an Ashkenazi European community, even more Anglo. However, the rabbi, they elected a rabbi. He's this young rabbi. He's 33, and he's this Yemenite guy,
Mhm.
right? So he's all in white with like the big white kippah on his head, and he's part of this very European synagogue, which is an interesting. I'm very into that as well, that they did that blend. But either way, he came up to speak, and he gave this nice little speech before they were blowing the shofar, and then he mentioned about the mother crying, and then he started crying, and he was just like to the crowd and to God saying like, but we're all righteous, we're all righteous. He's like, why won't you come? Why won't you come and redeem us?
Mhm.
And that's like he was just crying. And then he stopped, and then we went into him blowing the shofar. So it was it was just intense to see, but beautiful. I don't know. I'm like a sucker to those kind of things. My wife's like, "Did you cry?" I'm like, "Yes, I did." I'm a sucker for those kind of stuff. All right.
Yeah, I mean, sounds packed and everything, like exemplifying it right before you.
So yeah, I've been like in where I went to study for years in my study hall in Yeshivat HaKotel.
Mhm.
That was like 600 students. That was like, and like people would come for prayer. That was like a whole intense thing. So this is like a lot more low key, but in some ways more intimate. All right, let's take it away.
Yeah, that's it.
But I hope it was meaningful and good. And I don't know what your plans are for Yom Kippur, but I hope it was a good trial.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Beseder. Rabbi, we're in Perek. What number is this? This is Mishnah Bet, right? Because we did Mishnah Aleph. Do you mind scrolling up just to Mishnah Aleph so we could see what we did? I just need a reminder. Over here. Akiva ben Mahalal, right. Dama and Baitan, okay, great. And we discussed that, and that was also very interesting. Rabbi Chananya, Zgan HaKohanim Omer, Have mitpalel בשלומה של מלכות, שאלמלא מורה איש רעהו חיים בלעו. רבי חנניה בן תרדיון אומר, שניים שיושבים ואין ביניהם דברי תורה, הרי זה מושב לצים, שנאמר ובמושב לצים לא יושב. אבל שניים שיושבים ויש ביניהם דברי תורה, שכינה שרויה ביניהם, שנאמר, אז נדברו ירא אדוני איש אל רעהו, ויקשיב אדוני וישמע, ויכתב ספר זיכרון לפניו, לירא אדוני ולחושבי שמו. אין לי אלא שניים, מניין, אפילו אחד שיושב ועוסק בתורה, שהקדוש ברוך הוא קובע לו שכר, שנאמר, יישב בדד וידום, כי נטל עליו. All right, Rabbi Hanania, scroll back up to the earlier English version over here. Rav Hananya, deputy to the Kohanim, to the high priest, to the priests, would say, pray for the integrity of the government, for where it not for the fear of the authority, a man would swallow his neighbor alive. Rabbi Hananya, son of Shadyon, would say, two who sit and no words of Torah pass between them, this is a session of scorners. As it is stated, and in the session of scorners, he did not sit. Psalms 1:1. But two who sit and exchange words of Torah, the divine presence rests among them. As it is stated, then the God-fearing converse with one another, and God listened and heard, and it was inscribed before him in a book of remembrance for those who fear God and give thought to his name. Malachi. From this I know only concerning two individuals. How do I know that even a single individual who sits and occupies himself with Torah, God designates reward for him? From the verse, he who sits alone in meditative stillness, indeed, he receives reward for it. Lamentations. All right. A jam-packed one today.
Yep.
So, Rabbi Hananya, and he is the deputy of the Kohanim. So, this is obviously a big deal that he was a deputy of the Kohanim. He is living during the Second Temple and all the way through to Yavne, as in post-destruction, and then moving to the new joint. And he is the deputy of the Kohanim. Really was at that time someone that if the high priest wasn't capable of performing services because he was sick or impure, then he was second in command, basically. So it's a serious position, and that's the character we're dealing with. We dealt with earlier someone else that was also very young that lived during the temple. Generally speaking, they come up in examples where the rabbis are trying to remember things that were in the temple, and they're always used as witnesses as well to explain and to reenact what they remember from those services, basically.
Right.
And he's telling us over here that we want to pray for the integrity of the government. Because were it not for fear of its authority, a man would swallow his neighbor alive. Also very intense. And also putting in context, this is during the Roman occupation. And so you'd be like, well, obviously for your country, as in like modern days Israel, that's great that you're pro your own country. But like, obviously this is novel because he's talking about sort of the enemy authority, the enemy power, yet he's still asking for their stability. Basically, he wants their integrity to stay intact. And he was, generally speaking, very against war. Like, obviously, there were others that were very against the government and against the authority. So he was against war. He's known as saying, Gadol HaShalom Sheshakul Keneged Kol Maaseh Bereshit. That peace itself, like maintaining peace, is bears his weight in gold, or it's as if it's as parallel importance to the creation of the universe itself, because obviously he's alluding to the fact that if there's no peace, there's destruction. If there's no destruction, there's chaos, and if there's chaos, there's nothing. Mm-hmm. So it was very, very important to him to maintain the peace as well. So having this kind of statement coming from him is quite natural. And I think you see over here, in a certain sense, like obviously this predates Hobbes, but you could see sort of like as far as political science going over here, that without government, basically, people are running wild. He famously has his book, The Leviathan, the whale. Basically, you have like this huge whale smiling, and that is like really much. And you could see this also with Daniel, the prophet, and he has the creatures emerging from the sea, and they're all different types of animals, and each animal is supposed to represent a different nation, basically. And there's something about, and we hear in the words over here that the Mishnah is using about he would swallow his neighbor alive, bal'o, right? Which is like sort of, well, we also see in the ocean, like, the bigger fish eating the smaller fish, which is recognizing that without these kind of structures, it's like a dog-eat-dog world out there. And then we could take a further step back and realize even these structures themselves are sort of seen as animals, basically, or seen as like these behemoths that like sort of are uncontrollable. I would say that with regard to Judaism specifically, we don't see ourselves like Daniel doesn't see us as an animal, basically, because there's a sense that all the way from the specific individual all the way till the collective, there's a divinity running all the way through.
Right. So you're saying that there is like the individuals there's a small fish, big fish, and then the governments also, or the nations or whatever, there's that dynamic happening as well, where the small country gets swallowed by the bigger country.
Correct. And it's well, at some point it's saying that it's important to have like, a stable government and like a functioning system of like, law and order, which is, we know how crucial that is, obviously. Like, right, we have, like, we'll take an example of, I decide that up till $900, you're not going to get arrested, right? So people are going to start looting, obviously, as you're dealing with in your state. This general mindset, this might be a little more contemporary, but obviously this encourages people to be, to hold their leaders accountable and be involved in, like, obviously Israel's dealing with this right now, right? Like, where you're going to have, where you could say for making sure we're keeping the integrity of the government, we have to bring the government down, right? So that would be like sort of how far do you pull that line of creating, let's say, anarchy, so to speak, in order to maintain that original idea you have. But again, I think it's more stressing the fact that you have to have a structure. There needs to be some sort of structure in place where the roads can be paved, water can make it your way. And that's why it's very important that you might have this sense, specifically talking to the Israelites, where you're not always in power. Sometimes you're in exile. Like, you're going to have to realize that you're not going to be able to buck against the authority all the time. We obviously hear Jeremiah talks about this as well, that you're going to have to be accepting of the nations that like you get sort of thrown out to. And we know that in Judaism, even in our halakha, we have to, there's sense where like, I was going to say more earlier in the Bible, even God mentions that like you have to be aware of like the plight of the slave, because you yourself were a slave, and recognizing like the other countries you came from. So there's a sense where like you can't just ignore the fact that these structures exist and think that God's on my side and I could just knock these things down, as Jacob likes to mention often with regards to Maimonides' censored portion of the value in Christianity and Islam. But I'm also talking about them less as governments, more as institutions and of bodies that Rambam also recognizes, like, they're, from a purely pragmatic point of view, their utility.
Right. So, a question, you might be going there anyway, but malchut. So that's what it's using here. So it's translated as government, can be translated into kingship, I guess, but also can have deeper connotations. So I wonder if there's like other twists.
There is, I wasn't going to go there, but there is obviously, I would say obviously from our conversations, but the Kabbalah will play around with that concept of malchut being like, malchut, as far as one of the spheres that we have within the tree of spheres that we have in Kabbalah, kingship, and this relates to the divine sparks, rather in Kabbalah, we'll see any foreign government or foreign authority as in this too is from God's providence, and that's how we have to try to find and identify the malchut, the divine spark of kingship, even in this corrupt kingship, basically, and recognize where we could elevate those things. So there's always going to have that twist. You could assume on your back pocket always, like, the reverse explanation 7 layers deeper is really what we're talking about. But yes, so that's there as well. And I think that's also kudos on you for noting and stressing the fact that they use that word. Kol hakavod. All right. We're moving on to Rabbi Hanania ben Tradion. Okay, so this is a different Rabbi Hanania that we're bringing in over here. He lived in Sachnin. Just Sachnin is a place in Israel, like in the Galilee, which actually has a fairly good soccer team. He was a wild man, and by that I mean like he taught Torah even though it became forbidden when they decided that none of this. He was still very much teaching Torah publicly. He's famously known as being one of the 10 martyrs. That's Asara Harugei Malchut, the ones we're going to read about on Yom Kippur. Horrible, horrible stories, how they were killed and tortured. He gets into trouble. He obviously gets killed. His son gets killed. One of his daughters gets sent to Rome to be a prostitute. But another daughter of his, Bruria, she marries Rav Meir, but Rav Bruria herself, she was a heavy hitter, and she was known to be a brilliant woman and have had some famous conversations with different sages, and even they accepted her halacha decree from her. So it's the early feminists. So what is this interesting character tell us? שניים שיושבים ואין ביניהם דברי תורה, הרי זה מושב לצים. שנאמר מושב לצים לא יושב, אבל שניים שיושבים ויש ביניהם דברי תורה, שכינה שורה ביניהם, שנאמר אז נדברו יראי אדוני איש אל רעהו, ויקשב אדוני וישמע ויכתוב ספר זיכרון לפניו ליראי אדוני ולחושבי שמו. So what is he telling us over here? שניים שיושבים ואין ביניהם דברי תורה, הרי זה מושב לצים. So if you're having a conversation between two people, and if there's no Torah there, so seemingly it's going to be a pointless conversation. There's nothing there. They're just shooting the shit. And so to speak, the Torah comes and says, we're not going to have any of this. There has to be some Torah there.
Yeah.
You could look at it differently and say okay, you're having the conversation, but if it's just a conversation about nothing, how is there room? You have to make room in the conversation for Torah. So even if, let's say, Torah isn't, let's say, the main goal, you have to leave space from it. Some look at it as being like the moshav, as in you've dedicated time, as in I finished working right now, and I tell my wife, for the next hour, I'm going to go chill with Greg. We're just going to go talk about the game. So that would be no. It's not only did you take the magic time that we say, you got to be learning and you got to be you've taken it right and you're allotting it for something else. So that there is no room for that really, as far as the Torah is concerned. This
is interesting.
Yeah, please.
Just a small interjection, but it's interesting because it reminds me of almost the reverse of that, where there is at least a custom. I don't know if it's a halacha, but at least a custom of when you start a drasha, or when you talk about Torah, you should start with a joke or it's some levity. So it's almost this thing of balance. It's almost like a yin and yang. If you're all in about Torah, you should put in some levity, especially at the beginning, so that maybe you diffuse some of the attention, whatever. And then in the reverse, if it's all about you just trying to shoot the shit or whatever you're talking about, then make sure that it's based on that there is some piece of Torah there that it can stand. It's not totally kind of a chaotic space. So
I like what you're saying, and I think you could also stress that by the fact that it says I wonder what it says in English though. Between the set of scores as it's stated. Okay, here it says a session, but it says moshav, and moshav comes from to sit. So it's almost as if it's one thing to have a small little joke in the beginning, and then you did a maaseh latzon from let's. But moshav letzim, or a session, you're sitting down and committing to this. Right. This is what it all is. So there would be a sense of if you're going to be la'amod, to stand with leitzim, be okay, you're still moving around. But if you're sitting there, clearly this has become the agenda. This is what you're committing to. This is where you're anchoring yourself down to as well. And there's a sense that also well, obviously different sages decided to look at this and say like, okay, like, but what if I'm discussing like my work and my financial stuff? So like, no, that's like exempt, like, right. That has to do with like your living and what you're doing. You could even, some people claim as that it could even be considered Torah itself because like you're doing it for your livelihood. But generally speaking, it's really coming to stress allotting time that's specifically made for non-Torah study. And it's not saying that the conversation has to be Torah all the time necessarily, but the attitude is that, and going back to the moshav or to the session, if you're someone that is used to have session where you just chill and talk about nothing, then you'll always talk about nothing. If you're someone that's used to just, even when they are chilling, they're still talking about lofty ideas, and the conversation is going to go that way anyways. And even if the whole conversation isn't about a Torah concept, you could be sure that some of it will be sprinkled around just by force of nature of how these people interact. So it's sort of, again, trying to remove you from like this mindset. There is interpretation which just talks about that it's two individuals that should be studying Torah together and instead are not. And they're each studying Torah separately. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. As in, because they could have reached higher heights if they were doing it together, but because they were stubborn and decided to study separately, this turned into a moshav leitzim, which is like, this is like you guys are being nonsensical, basically. You're being like sort of this is comical in a bad sense, where like you guys are just both going to end up losing from this slapstick interaction. Mm-hmm. Now that we get a quote over here that we get sometimes, and it's a famous quote from the first Psalms, Tehillim, Shenemar b'moshav leitzim lo yashav. Now this is curious because do you mind actually opening up that Psalms?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Yeah. I don't know if it'll open. It seems like maybe. Oh, it went. Okay, good.
I want to read it in context, if you don't mind.
Sorry?
I said I want to read it just inside. I'd rather put it in. You said it's not
opening up?
Oh, you
can't see it. Wait. Let me. I open it up, but I need to. Let me do this again.
No problem.
Window. Here we go. We have a whole window now.
Okay. אשרי האיש אשר לא הלך בעצת רשעים ובדרך חטאים לא עמד ובמושב לצים לא ישב. כי אם בתורת אדוני חצו ובתורתו יגע יומם ולילה. והיה כעץ שתול על פלגי מים, אשר פריו ייתן בעיתו ועלהו לא ייבול, וכל אשר יעשה יצליח. לא כן הרשעים, כי אם כמוץ אשר תדפו רוח. על כן לא יקימו רשעים במשפט וחטאים בעדת צדיקים, כי יודע אדוני דרך צדיקים בדרך רשעים תאבד. Okay, so we could read this in English as well, but first, we're basically talking about over here, we praise the man who did not follow the counsel of the wicked, and we brought over here that they're not in the company of the scorners, but is desired to learn the Torah. He should be like a tree planted beside the rivers of water. He brings forth fruit, and his leaves do not wilt. Not so the wicked, but they are like chaff in the wind, right? They blow away. Mm-hmm. So we see a few different people over here in this interesting Tehillim. We could switch back. We could stay over here for a second, but we see the lets, the scorners. We see the wicked, and we have the tzaddik, we have the righteous, and we have also a guy over here that's a chataim, and we have sins. So you could see there's a sense where we're getting a breakdown over here of like the characters we need to deal with. There is the wicked, who is basically the opposite of the righteous. and the righteous is someone that is following in God's footsteps. Okay.
Yeah.
And we have and we see what happens over here. We see that the way of the wicked is not going to work, and the way of the sins. They can't be with the righteous. But we don't address the let's over here. The scorner sort of stays unscathed. Like what's with his future? We know that the wicked is not successful and the sinner is not successful. And even looking at them, we have to see where they're coming from, right? The sinner is not the sinner. The wicked man is saying, I understand the values of the righteous, but I'm not interested in them.
Right.
And the sinner comes and says, I understand the values of the righteous. I'd like to be there, but I find myself sinning. The scorners over here, they're not interested in anything. They're not interested in any of these values. They're not bringing anything new to the table. And that's why, and this is harsh in this interpretation, there's no reference to them in the continuation of the Psalms because they have no place in the world to come. And that's because, and I'll throw in postmodernism over here, but when you bring in a concept that leads nowhere and takes you nowhere, you're not adding anything. You're just basically creating a reality where there is no world to come. There is nothing. There are no values. And those people, those are the litzim. It's not necessarily like someone cracking jokes, but it's more of someone that could sound very intellectual and very charismatic, but is really bringing nothing but nihilism to the table. And the Torah in this sense, or Psalms in this sense, is saying, again, the wicked and the sinner, they're still in the spectrum. The let's has removed himself.
Yeah, and I feel it's a hard spot because it's almost like I don't have this graph here, but this meme about like you know nothing, you know everything, and then you kind of like, what is that? I keep forgetting that word. But like there's a person that knows nothing and kind of strives to know something, and then they feel like they know everything, and they're like at the top of that graph. But that's kind of like also where all the deconstruction happens, because you think you know everything. Okay, I know what the righteous are doing. I know what the wicked are doing. They're all playing this game, and it's all on the spectrum. So it's all kind of like everybody's like choosing everything. It's this like what you described as this deconstructive, like postmodern thing. But then if you don't, that's the almost the worst place to be. I don't know, depending, but in terms of like not going back down and choosing something for yourself, or actually enacting something other than just being in this feedback loop of like, this is something that's like both real and
you're in the session, right? You're in the moshav. You're in the feedback loop place. You're not moving. You're not moving around. You're not getting new perspectives or new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you could see that. I mean, it's beautiful the way they say it over here. I'm just reading it in English, which brings forth its fruit in its season, and its leaves do not wilt. So obviously, like the reward you're saying, like it like the righteous has its full potential, where like it reaches its destination with like creating this fruit. However, it tells you that even the additional structure and assistance for this fruit, like the leaves, which you could be like, okay, so I have the fruit. What does it matter if the leaves wilt? Like the whole process is sustaining as far as the righteous is concerned. Mm-hmm. Like the fruit, while still having a leaf, and even the bark itself, all of it, the whole tree, the whole vehicle itself is elevated in that point, and then is like eternal in a certain sense.
Right.
Okay, let's continue. You mind switching back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. But two people that are sitting down and they do have Torah between them. שכינה שורה ביניהם, שנאמר, אז נדברו יראי אדוני איש אל רעהו, ויקשב אדוני, וישמע ויכתב ספר זיכרון לפניו ליראי אדוני. So, off the bat, since we're talking about a conversation like Divrei Torah, a conversation about God, then very quickly it's also filled with God himself. God it seemingly wants to join that type of conversation that we are opening up in that kind of dialogue. And like when we have to realize, like when individuals are engaging like in these kind of discussions, I would say we're stressing Torah right now, but more broadly, like meaningful, ethical, even philosophical, but I would say we could put that also aside. Like that really, it could transform like any mundane conversation to like higher heights. And like, you could look at it as a sense of like, like I'm really talking about God and I feel him with me there, to like a sense of, you don't have to go to the level of God, but more just the fact that I could be talking about this. We could talking about Black Mirror, or we could talk about Black Mirror in the sense of like what it means to our culture and to our people and where we're going and what we're doing as a parent. So that's already like a much richer and engaging conversation that God is interesting that we're having. And there, like in a sense, you can also see over here, and it's beautiful how it stresses, and Martin Buber talks about this a lot in his book, I and Thou, but the fact that God is here when there's two people, when there's this dialogue. And this reminds me obviously of the famous words, we're told that God tells Moses, no one could see my face and live. And at the same time, later God tells Moses, like Moses saw me face to face, right? He says, Lo yirani adam v'chai, but then he says he saw me panim panim, kasher yidabir ish re'eu. And there is where there's a sense where like God is speaking to Moses face to face, kasher, and you could interpret that as when, like another human is interacting with another human. That's where the divine happens. That's when you could see the divine spark, and that's where you could try to start to shape out God's image in a certain sense. And there's a famous story about the ask in the Gemara, like what is the most important pasuk in the Torah, and they get different answers. One says Dabru l'chol adat bnei Yisrael chodesh hazeh rosh chodashim, and the different sacrifices you bring. And once, et hakeves ta'achat haseh ben ha'arbaim, talking about the different sacrifices you're supposed to bring. One talks about ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, and one talks about zeh sefer todot ha'adam, talking about this is the book we're writing about people themselves, and it's also a quote from the Bible. And the interpretation of this is talking about different stages. When we are in Eden, earlier on, or let's say, or even like in the desert, or when God is speaking to us, then it's God's will. So we look at that specific verse that talks about like the exact type of sacrifice I need to bring, because it's very exact, and I'm accepting God's yoke. When I'm distant and I'm separate from God, that's where I need the dialogue. And I can't see God anymore from just his commandment. Rather, I need to see God in my conversation with the other. And that's ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, and people forget the continuation of that pasuk. Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, ani Hashem. If you look at that, kamocha ani Hashem, which is recognize, love your neighbor as yourself, and recognize, because kamocha ani Hashem, because God himself is in you. And if you recognize that in the other, that's obviously you'll get to that higher state. And eventually in the world to come, Zeh Sefer Todot Ha'adam, we'll be in a place where we recognize it's really all about the human, and not by being selfish, but the divine spark is in us, me, myself, the individual. I don't even need the other anymore. I could see it already in myself that God's made me in his image, basically. But we're not there yet, and those are different sort of gradation. But that just reminds me again of like what we're talking about, like the two people having this conversation. It also reminds me of I got confused between the psukim. There's a pasuk that God seemingly tells Moshe, Dabru kol adat b'nei Israel, and letting them know about the first of the month that they need to sanctify it. And we ask, why dabru? Why speak in plural? Because he's talking to Moses. Right. And the interpretation is, well, he's talking to Moses and Aaron. And then there's another question, but why would they speak to Aaron? Because everyone knows that Moses is the one that's speaking. Aaron's not the one that's speaking. And Rashi gives an interpretation to this that says, which is beautiful, that they shared a respect to each other and they would speak to each other first, in a sense of Moses and Aaron both heard God speak, but then Aaron and Moses would go to each other. What did you hear him say? And what did you hear him say? And that's to even show that even Moses or even Aaron, both of them said, like, I don't want to take on the full interpretation by myself. I want it to happen through dialogue. I want to make sure that I understood correctly, and I want to make sure you understood correctly. And they're triangulating themselves basically in that way to really make sure they're giving the proper information. So here too, I think it relates to this kind of conversation of having the chavruta, having the study partner, doing that together is where you could find that that divine spark, or where you could have the feel like the Shekhinah is amongst you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes sense. I might have been rambling a little on that one.
No, it makes sense. I don't think I have any question about that.
Well, I think in general, and this goes back to like the thinky talky kind of conversation, which is people like sort of get against that. Like there's too much talking, but I think like, teachings like this, like they're really emphasizing like the transformative power that, types of conversation like these, like they could have, and like how to prioritize like deep and thoughtful conversations with people.
I mean, in where you do them. I mean, it's like it's talking about this here, but I mean the whole context I find the whole context of the various Mishnayot that we've listened to, that we've read, talk about all the things that you need to set yourself up for these kind of conversation. And even just the setting yourself up for the conversation, even just building the space where it would be possible to have that kind of conversation is already the kind of work that is exactly not thinky talky.
Right. So you could say, you're right. You could say like there's like already creating your house of Vadle Rabbanim and setting the house and like all that is already very embodied already. And
that
like
is not thinky talky. That's
correct.
That's building a house, that's having a family that will be happy with what you do. They will give you the space to do that. That's like building a chair, whether you're building it from IKEA or from yourself. I'm giving very specific examples of it, but I feel like this is the things that you draw from these conversations that can tell you, okay, if this is the kind of life that I need to be having, this is the kind of experience that I want to have, then I need to practically make that happen. And if I really think it through, then I need to build that chair. I need to have I need to have 6 chairs in my house, just like for Rosh Hashanah. Like we needed to buy more chairs, we needed to buy more plates, we needed to buy like wine glasses because we didn't have any. Just moved here, so if this is the things, if you want to have a big family or be in that kind of like environment, then this is the practical things that you're going to have to do.
Yes, and I would just add to that, but like eventually once you figured out that amount of chairs, once the meal starts happening, then then that's where the conversation needs to now be, not the Moshav. Let's see. Like you set the table and you've created this whole space.
Yeah.
For a purpose.
100%. Yeah.
Well, let's end this Mishnah. In the Elashnaim, right? We're saying, okay, we learned this about 2. What about the lonely guy? What about him? Shakadosh Baruch Hu kover lo sachar shenemar yashav badad v'idom ki natal alav. I liked how they said this in English. He sits alone in a meditative stillness. Indeed, he receives reward for it. The meditative stillness in Hebrew is badad v'idom. Okay, I understood a different translation, but it's also nice. So first of all, we could ask, why is this guy alone? Who's this guy?
Yeah.
It's the guy that couldn't find the study partner. Like, there's going to be people that are just like it's not going to work for them. Right? Like this isn't the guy that didn't want a study partner, or I mean, first of all, maybe it's those guys too. But like, it's, there are going to be people that are going to be left alone ultimately. So even them, we're telling you, first of all, guess what? Like, even you get reward. It requires more effort from you, because it says over here, in English it says, indeed he receives reward for it. In Hebrew it says ki natal alav. Like, sort of, this is an action which requires me to take for myself, basically. Like, I take, like, so basically God is offering the reward, but it's not happening through dialogue. It's happening through, you're in your own space, and this is happening in your own space, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, it requires more from you. It requires for you to go up and actually pull it down, in a certain sense. And when I learned Vaidom meant that not that he was silent, but he was speaking very quietly. So it's supposed to be that he's speaking to himself, learning to himself. But you could look at that as like I'm in a meditative state, like, chanting my mantras or doing my thing. So you're in your space, basically. So even then, it just is going to require more work from you.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah. Let's do it. Gimel.
Rabbi Shimon Omer. Here we go. Now you got the extra chair. Now we're at the table.
Yeah.
על שולחן אחד, ולא אמרו עליו דברי תורה, כאילו אכלו מזבחי מתים, שנאמר, כי כל שולחנות מלאו, כי צואה בלי מקום. אבל 3 שאכלו על שולחן אחד, ואמרו עליו דברי תורה, כאילו אכלו משולחנו של מקום, שנאמר, וידבר אליי, זה השולחן אשר לפני אדוני. Rabbi Shimon would say, 3 who eat at one table and do not speak words of Torah, it is as if they have eaten of idolatrous sacrifices. As it is stated, indeed, all tables are filled with vomit and filth, devoid of can you make that bigger?
Of the omnipresent, yeah.
Is that what it says over there? I'm just seeing it like pixelized.
Yeah, let me just.
Devoid of the omnipresent, yes. Isaiah 28:8. Perfect, thank you. But 3 who eat at one table and speak words of Torah, it is as if they have eaten at God's table. As it is stated, and he said to me, this is the table that is before God, Ezekiel. Okay. So Rabbi Shimon, I mean, it could be different Rabbi Shimon, but it could be that it's RSBY, Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the main man, the book that the hero of the Zohar book is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, one of the most famous students of Rabbi Akiva. He was known as he had for his very powerful interpretive methods and skills. He also was very good at taking a verse and interpreting it through the trends of the generations, as in through the trends of, let's say, Moses to the prophets. I mean, like to the kings and to the prophets, and be like where this delineates and where this changes, basically. So he had a tremendous amount of insight. Famously, he got into trouble with the authorities and had to go run away and hide in a cave with him and his son.
Right.
They would study naked in the sand, covering their bodies so they could wear their clothing on the Shabbat. There was a miracle, and they had a cherub tree and a little spring that they could drink from. Just going to add one more thing, famously on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that when he emerges out of the cave, he sees that the Israelites are dealing with like mundane stuff, and he can't handle this, and he starts burning their stuff and getting out of control, and lasers coming out of his eyes, and God comes and says like, whoa, bro, like, did you come out of this cave to destroy? He's like, you go back. And then he comes back a year later and he's still upset, but he sees a guy running and preparing for Shabbat, and it soothes his soul and he relaxes. And there's a lot we could learn from that, from the prophet coming down from the mountain and the levels of interpretations. And there's senses of also the first tablets and the second tablets, and the first tablets gets destroyed and we require second tablets, which are more earth-like and that the humans can understand. So there's different levels of interpreting it. Either way, very, very interesting character was Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. So what does he say? And the translation over here is idolatrous sacrifices, but metim means dead sacrifices or unholy sacrifices in a certain sense. But first it would be, like we said earlier, if I'm coming to this table, and specifically not only the conversation, which we said, I'm having the conversation about nothing, that's one thing. But now I've set aside a table. We're going together to Mickey D's, and we're only talking about nonsense. That means the reason we're there is to satisfy our need for food. And that now has turned into the idol.
Mm-hmm.
So you are, because there's no Torah there, and because because of the context, and because you've decided to have something else become the priority, then that's the only result, is that become the new priority. And if the priority is not God, ultimately speaking, then it's idol worship.
So let me push back.
Sure.
I know this might take time, but let me just push back. So you're saying that play devil's advocate a little bit, but you're saying we're going to Mickey D's and we're having food and we're there to satisfy ourselves, but why isn't it enough for me to go and just spend time eating and not concern myself with anything else? And I'll go back and I'll do it I'll go and I'll think about those higher things, maybe after I eat or at some point afterwards. But why does it need to be at everything that I do? Like when I go eat, why does it have to invade that space as well?
So I think it's interesting over here that originally it was 2, and now you're talking about over 3. But even the example you gave me is Chezi, what if I do this? And I'll tell you as an individual, that's fine. You could do that individual. Like we said earlier, if I need to be talking about my taxes right now, then yeah, that's work related.
Right.
But you just now sat down for a meal of 3.
Right.
So this isn't you just being well, I'm going to eat right now and go back. No, you've decided to be well, let's go meet up and let's go eat. And now you're telling me I'm starving. Let's go eat something. No. If you're starving, then eat something in the house because you're starving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I want to go out and see my friends and I'm hungry, then it's okay to see your friends and it's okay to be hungry. The essence can't be, and you've all gathered around this table, right? Which is, it's more than that. It's also, it's the set table. It's the symbolism of you're creating this, and we're going to repeat this in a moment. When we say in the last, the verse from Ezekiel, there's this table over here that has the potential of being the table for God. And instead, your hierarchy is the food we're eating and do we get enough ketchup, and then talking about nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay? Did I push back your pushback?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good distinction. I feel like it's a good distinction about the multiple people, because that becomes social, and obviously when it becomes social, it's something that builds. It's more than just in the moment. This is something that is starting to stagger up into what we can think about as a society or something. And so I think that makes it more important to that.
And you could even say that early we said two people that don't have Torah between them, right? We said that wasn't ideal, obviously. But you could tell about the meal, 2 people that sat down to eat. They just 2 people that sat down to eat, so they didn't come. It's not that they sat down to do a session of nonsense like the Moshav Latzi. That would be a problem. And it's not like that. It's 3 people that came together. This is like you just said. It's becoming like a posse right now. 2 people sitting down to eat. It's if they're saying we get that could just happen accidentally and good. Then eat your food quickly and get on with it, basically.
Yeah.
But it's more about once it's turning into a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. There's another also interpretation, which is the Zivchei Matim, which is like it's as if it's a table of mourners, because mourners can't. When you're in the mourning period, you're not allowed to study Torah, which causes happiness. So, like, it's as if you're not studying Torah. The name Zivchei Matim was also used as like you're as if you're at a table of mourners, basically.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Shene'emar, we said, ki kol shulchanot malu ki utzua bli makom, and we say over here that it's bli makom, and the makom, as the Kabbalists always teach us, the makom is God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The makom is, and obviously where He is missing, then the place is lacking. We've already decided that God is not there. Then obviously God is not there. The filth, the vomit, all that, obviously, and He says over here, devoid of omnipresence. And like if it's also, it sort of requires you to have your glasses of leit atar panui midei, which is there's no space void of you. And if you realize that, then you're like, holy crap. If I realize that God is present everywhere, but then I'm creating a space where I'm purposely removing Him from, then all I'm left with then is like the material nothing that turns into worm, vomit, dirt, dust, nothing. It's
right.
like
life and death. So like
it's almost like obviously you should be recognizing God everywhere, but even more so, if you're not recognizing Him everywhere, definitely don't be removing Him from the places that He should be present in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Aval shlosha she'achlu al shulchan echad, right? Like we said earlier. Like now we have the flip side. 3 that ate at one table, ve'amru elav divrei Torah, and they did speak words of Torah. Kilu achlu mishulchano shel makom baruch hu. It's as if they have eaten at the table of God. They've elevated the status, and like what we said earlier, like now it's a table where now we could recognize, God is in the conversation, in you, in me, in the Mickey D's, in the fact that this establishment's working. It's amazing that it got here so fast, and that's because they have electricity. It's a good thing that the government's instilling integrity. You very quickly can start scaling up, seeing God everywhere, basically. Uh-huh. And again, that's the question is like, what's your orientation? Is it just the table? And I think that's also the symbolism of the table, which we have in the last verse over here, which is, how do we know that it's God's table? Right? Because Ezekiel's talking about is the altar in that verse is called a table. And that's the thing, we bring things up. We sacrifice things on. So there's always little tables. There's actual tables that we sit on, right? Then we eat in like your Rosh Hashanah table. And there's the table that we have this discussion. There's Camelot's round table. There's that place where we come to convene. Mm-hmm. So in a certain sense, I would even say the table is the world itself that's laid before us. And we have we have many times al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed, right? We have like this tripod that the things are on. That's the table, the set table that's in front of us. And we have to recognize God is always there, ultimately speaking. So whether it's the personal table or the meta table that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, it rings true to me because I have thinking of examples of conversations that I've been a part of that you start the conversation, and it could be with people that you know, and you start the conversation, and the conversation goes into a lull, even for just like even like a second. And people realize that there is nothing to talk about, like that there's nothing, that there is no, and that there is nothing to talk about in the moment, or they can't think of anything. And then you start, and then a lot of junk suddenly, boom, like just starts like getting in, and then the whole thing devolves. And it's like, I don't mean it devolves into like arguments or heated discussion. It devolves into discussion about things that don't matter at all. Just watching the television or like clips that don't like. I've been in conversation. I've been in a place where like you would just have you would just watch something and won't even discuss it or not do anything. So I feel like it's almost like the that Torah that they're talking about, they're talking about, the Torah that is spoken about here. It's almost like a seed that in every conversation that you put that seed, it allows it to, it's the seed that is required so that it goes, it has actual places to go that bear fruit and don't just like go and like become these feedback loops that make you feel kind of like, what were we doing there like for 3 hours?
Did you ever see the movie The Big Short?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know that Ryan Gosling gives like his explanation with like the Jenga tower, and he
Right.
comes and says like, you know, there was these grade A and grade B. He's like, and then they started taking like junk, like grade C and grade D,
Right.
and like putting it all together and calling it like, you know, X. And I think that's what happens in conversations. Like as many times you have like the grade A and the grade even B sometimes conversation happening, and then people start clumping up like a lot of nonsense into some sort of like cohesive sort of conversation. But when you go home, like you just said, like it's nothing I could carry. It starts falling apart with I have it like that Jenga thing because there's nothing there. With the A's and the B's, there's some substance over there. They could carry the weight of the rest of the structure.
Mhm.
But these nothingness conversations, there's nothing there. And that goes back to the shulchan. Like, does your table have anything to stand
Yeah.
on? And by the way, just zivchei metim, again, what they're talking about, because obviously the sacrifice is dead. So like, why? So what if the sacrifice is already dead? I'm sacrificing it. But the sense is that like I'm like sort of like the phoenix. Like I'm sacrificing one thing to gain more, but zivchei metim is I'm bringing it ready like a dead sacrifice. There's no movement of transformation. There's no like it was this. I want to get this. I want to gain something new. I want to rise up from the ashes. Basically, it's a dead, lifeless conversation. Basically,
Yeah, it's non-productive.
it's non-productive. Correct. Also, just a little thing. This ve'yedaber elai zeh shulchan asher lifnei Adonai. In the Vayedaber, in the Psukim, in the continuation of the Psukim, it's talking about the table, and it talks about its size, that it's 3 amot, and Vayedaber is supposed to be words of Torah, because on the altar you sacrifice, you don't say words, but here it's supposed to be like the words of Torah, and the fact that it's 3 amot is referencing Torah Nevi'im Ktuvim, and that's like why this was referencing back to that thing, that this is really talking about the Torah, but that's more of like a cutesy thing that I remember being told.
Insider baseball.
Yeah, insider baseball, right. Let's last Mishnah. I think it's a short one.
Yeah.
If you scroll down. Oh, very short one.
Very short.
Rabbi Chaninya ben Chachniai. I remember him. Interesting character. Omer, he says, הנאור בלילה והמהלך בדרך יחידי והמפנה ליבו לבטלה, הרי זה מתחייב בנפשו. All right, and what are we told of here? Rabbi Nechunya, the son of Hanka, sorry, jump to the next one. Rabbi Chanina, son of Chanchai, would say, one who stays awake at night or travels alone on the road and turns his heart to idleness has forfeited his life. Boom. Intense. A classic, intense, over the top Pirkei Avot statement. So first of all, the character over here, he also was a student of Rabbi Akiva and friend of the Rashbi. He, like Rabbi Akiva, but with less successful. Rabbi Akiva famously got married, then left his wife to go study, and then came back, and then left again. So his students, our individual we're talking about over here, also try to do that move. It's like the first fail reveal, basically. He comes back after 10 years or 20 years. I can't remember how long he leaves for. He comes back to his wife, and she's so shocked to see him that she dies.
Oh, wait.
And then he has to do some miracle and basically bring her back to life, basically. But I guess he should have maybe texted beforehand.
Yeah.
Plan, telling his friends, she's going to love it. How long has it been, Hananya? It's been 20 years, but, I'm thinking the long roll, the long haul joke. She'll appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about first. You could look at these two cases over here that he's telling us about: staying awake at night, or one that travels alone. So one is talking about seemingly like this. It could be framed as part of the idleness. It's part of the and turns his heart to idleness, as in one is an example of someone who is, due to their circumstances, is being idle, which is the one that stays awake at night, basically. Like, I can't fall asleep. The one that and you could even say the one that travels, like he found himself in this circumstance right now where he's alone and he's walking. So like, what is he going to do? Like, yeah, my iPhone's dead and no one could go on the jog with me. So like, I'm alone. However, you could then look at it separately. And there's one that turns his heart to idleness purposely. Like that's what he's looking to do. Right. So there's people that find themselves in idle situations because of circumstance. And there's people that put themselves in idle situations because they want to be in this place. And this, just thinking about someone up in the middle of the night just reminds me of like doom scrolling or like nonstop going up and down your phone. And that sense where like you just can't, or even if you're alone, I'm just going to pick up my phone right now and I'm just going to scroll or looking at something. And I think in a certain sense, the Torah is letting you know, the Mishnah is letting you know, we spoke about this in the past of imloch shav ematai, like you have to find the right time, like seize the day, carpe diem. It's saying, listen, there's going to be these times in your life where like are prime times for deep introspection, trying to really do real deep work. And that's going to be if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't fall asleep, seize that moment. That's the moment where you want to be trying to connect. Or guess what? You're walking alone. He couldn't end up jogging with you. Don't pick up the phone and just try to like, now I'm just going to like, I found a little pocket of time where there's nothing there. I'm going to quickly fill it with idleness, basically. And
okay. Yeah. It just dropped. The coin just dropped because for some reason I thought like, if you wake up, I wonder if other people accept. That's why I'm mentioning. If you stay awake at night, then it's not good. But no, what we're saying is, or what this is saying is that if you wake up at night and or travel along the road, and at that point you turn your heart to idleness, you doom scroll, then you forfeited your life.
Well, we'll get to the forfeiting of the life, but the attitude is just, again, it's trying to stress that like you could look at these scenarios of being like, these are scenarios where you should stay out of trouble. It's saying these are scenarios that are describing like moments where like you could be solitude and have like major introspection, but you could squander it very quickly. Like you should realize like these are like the magic moments. Like, sometimes you get up in the middle of the night, which is a great feeling. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And you're like, you look at the clock, it's only 2 a.m. You're like, oh great. Like I have another 4 hours of sleep at least. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then there's something like I get up and like, what am I going to do right now? Am I going to start worrying? Like, no, you found it. You're on magic time right now. Right. Use it. Lock in. And I mean, I could tell myself that like, when I'm walking and I don't have my phone, I'm always having headphones on. You can be like, oh, well, I'm learning. I'm listening to that class. I'm doing stuff. But there's something about like, well, maybe nothing. Maybe just like walk and think and hear and experience and like be present. So like that is really what the focus is over here. And then to their intense attitude, which is you're forfeiting your life. But again, like this is what I was talking about in Loch Shav Ematai, because you have to realize life is like, is fleeting and it goes away so quickly. And those moments you're going to wish that you had them. And you have to realize that you're forfeiting your life. Again, you could look at this from like a surface level, that if you wake up in the middle of the night or you're alone in the middle of the streets, like you're risking your life because like, someone's going to get you. But there's another sense of looking at this, which is like a little more depressing, which is, okay, who's the person that's waking up alone in the middle of the night? And the guy that's walking alone because he couldn't get the friend. And the guy that's purposely deciding he's alone and waking up alone, then I'm going to turn my heart to idleness. That's the person that couldn't make it in society. He's already in the outskirts. He's already alone. He can't find the study partner. And that's the guy that where the Torah's, the Mishnah is warning him, if you, the depressed person, the outcast. If you now try to even more so be by yourself, you are endangering your life because no one's going to be able to see you anymore physically.
Mhm.
Like we won't, out of sight, out of mind. We don't hear from you. We can't see you. We can't engage you. You've removed yourself from society, from the community. So you have to realize you're going to end up vanishing, whether it's because you get killed because no one saw you, or whether it's because like you just become irrelevant because there's nothing that you're offering and there's nothing that's being offered to you.
Right. And so I wanted to also connect this to to kind of like zoom in on the word lebatala, because it's very much, feel like that's very much connected to the previous Mishnah. We talked about this thing of this what seems to me to be a very important point, which is this about this kind of like this non-productive, or this like internal feedback loop, right? Or like this thing that just eats itself at the end of the day. And batala, I feel like it's like, it could be idleness, but like the fact that in Hebrew batala or bitul, or obviously you could say zera le batala, which is even more on the nose. So the fact that bitul, like that it's well, you can help me with translation, but it's like it's for naught. It's canceled.
You're canceling something. You're making something void. You're basically
void, right. It's like it becomes it's nothing. It's kind of like it's a line, and like it goes nowhere. It's just there's an end to it. It doesn't continue anywhere. When you engage in those kind of right, when you engage in those kind of activities, even in yourself, and like you said, in that specific prime time that you have, or from the perspective of the press person, which is this is the times that they're likely to have those moments, then you're engaging that feedback loop. You're engaging in that specific thing that is so that it's dangerous. So,
it reminds me of something I tell people, but I would use it like it would be the reverse over here, which is, let's say you moved, right, and that was like a stressful period. So my advice would have been to you before the move, being, listen, you got to take an advance from your future.
mm-hmm.
Ben in a year from now is already going to be settled and chill. So you got to tap into that Ben and take a little of his chillness for now, because like you got to take an advance in your future.
Right.
Here, when they're saying he's forfeited his life, it's as if he's saying like it didn't happen this second. But you have to realize once you turned your heart to the idleness, to the vatala, to the void, you're not leaving yourself any advances to take it on anymore. Basically, like you're going to end the lifeline. You're going to end the conversation, and you're going to find yourself in a year from now with nothing. There's not going to be anything for you to take out from, or to lean on, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. The word vatala over here, or like it becomes void, is more. It's better stress in that word than idleness.
Mm-hmm.
Basider, I think we'll stop here.
Sounds good. Yeah.